I think also illustration has got that handmade feel. It feels like it's, created by somebody. It has a human touch.
Welcome to the Pixel Paper Podcast, a series where we get to know the creative processes behind up-and-coming digital artists. My name is Noor, graphic designer and work-in-progress artist, and I'll be your host for this series. Hi Tom, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. For the sake of our audience, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tom Clohosy Cole. I've been working as a freelance illustrator and designer for the last 10, 11 years. I mainly make work for children's books and children's book publishers. I also do a lot of design for animation. So doing things like backgrounds and character design. I studied at Kingston University. I left there in 2011. I did illustration and animation, but then I switched back to illustration after a year of animation to do a lot of printmaking work. I mainly work in Photoshop. Recently got an iPad, which I love. So I'm drawing on that as much as I can now. And yeah, that's me.
Nice. I mean, there's a lot there actually for me to unpack, but I just realized actually that my last interview that I did, which is going out in probably September, he also studied in Kingston, the artist who I interviewed. But
Oh, really?
He graduated a couple of years ago, so you probably won't know him. But he's called Junho Ko, and he studied illustration.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, he also studied. I believe it's just illustration that he studied. But yeah, it's interesting. But we can get onto that a bit later. I just want to tell the audience why I wanted to interview you. Actually, you were one of the first artists that I really just wanted to get on the podcast. So I'm really excited that you agreed, because I remember I picked up your book, The Warhorse, which you illustrated in the bookstore, and I just fell in love with your illustrations, because at that time I was actually commissioned to do some children's book illustrations myself, so I was just looking for inspiration. And so when I saw your style, I was like, oh my god, this is just perfect, So could you tell us a bit more about the background behind your art and your journey?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thanks for picking up the book. It's much appreciated.
Yep.
I guess, well, a lot of it comes from Kingston, I think. We were always taught that an illustration needs to communicate a story or an idea to the viewer, and that was kind of really drilled into us at uni. I think I tend to try and always have some kind of narrative in every illustration, because of, I think my tutor Jeff was just like, what's it saying? Where's the story? Where's the action? But a lot of the time what needs to be communicated is kind of outlined in a brief from a client. So the job of an illustrator, or most of my jobs, are just to kind of communicate the brief. But on the rare occasions that I do a bit of personal work, I kind of have to think up something myself. So yeah, usually it will just be a little bit of movement or a bit of action, somebody I don't know, interacting with another character. But I feel like as putting characters, even like a little bit of wind sometimes can help. A movement on clothes, but some kind of movement often kind of starts to tell a story in an image, and then I think you can kind of build from there. I often ask myself, like, what's happening, where's the action, where's the movement, which way is the sun going, which way is the main character looking and moving, that kind of that kind of stuff. Sorry, what was the second part of your question again?
And what influences the stories behind your
art? I think it's probably I don't know really, maybe a reflection of some of the things that I'm soaking up as I'm kind of in my everyday life, I guess, watching films and reading. Often watching kind of sci-fi film always kind of inspires me to make some work about space, or I think books and film, and often kind of weirdly landscape photography I just love, and nice. So I'm always kind of hunting that down online. That kind of often.
That's cool. Do you do landscape photography yourself?
No. But I often, like, if I'm away on holiday or something, I'll take a lot of photos to kind of use as reference. I kind of would much prefer to gather all that kind of stuff myself. But they're never good pictures. They're never really worth sharing. But
But I think in a way that's good, because there's an artist I follow online called Angry Miko. I don't know if you know him.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah.
So he said in one of his videos that he likes to use bad reference photos, because when you're making the art, you're actually adding onto the image as opposed to just copying a really nice photo already. Because if the photo's already nice, then there's not much else to add. But if the photo's bad, the photo reference, then you're enhancing the image through your art. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point.
So don't feel bad if your photos are bad.
No, that's really good. I often, like, I'll take really bad photos, but then I'll just chop them up. So I'll be like, like, take the sheep from that one, and take the hill from this one, and the sky from that one, because they're never like great as a whole piece, but there might be something in each one that's got something worth keeping, I think.
Yeah, that's smart. And when you were saying, like, when you do personal work, for example, you try and put a story behind it. So is that normally more spontaneous, or do you have like a place where you record your thoughts and emotions, or inspirations or anything like that? I write a kind of, or I have been for the last year since the pandemic, like a little kind of journal of what I'm up to each morning, just kind of like what I did the previous day, but less so kind of ideas. I kind of tend to like just like start a new Google document if I ever have an idea, and then I'll write a load of stuff in it. And I started using an app called Notion, which is quite good. Notion. I love Notion.
Yeah, it's really good actually. I've got really obsessed with using it for food. I've got like recipes that I've been cooking, and like I write down all the ingredients so that if I go shopping, then I know exactly what to get. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, it's so great. And even for this podcast, like, it's been so useful because I can organize everything in like an Excel kind of sheet, and then within that Excel sheet I can put all the pages of the people, and I can just put all the questions in and all the answers. It's great. I love Notion.
Yeah, I love the like a note within a note within a note, that you can really just keep going deeper and deeper. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so I kind of I keep notes in there. But it's, I mean, the amount of time that I get to do personal work is quite, it's been more over the pandemic, but it's never loads of time. So I kind of my personal work tends to be less kind of like long ideas and more like a quick thing that I want to test out or something,
Yeah. Do you think it's important to always do personal work on the side?
Yeah, I think so. I think it keeps you, I think you can get a little bit, a bit down sometimes if you're just doing client work, because it feels like nothing is for you, especially when if you do kind of back-to-back jobs that are quite kind of like hard going, and often when you're doing a job, you're asked to make so many changes that you can really feel like it's not something that you've created anymore, or like you don't have much attachment to it. So I think it's quite good doing personal work to kind of like reset where your work's going, or what you want to do, and just to kind of have a bit of fun with your work, because otherwise doing illustration can turn into a real job. And I feel like for me, there's been years where it's kind of like I've done a lot more personal work, and it's been a lot more fun, and then a couple of years in between that have been quite hard, that have been like just doing really quite tough jobs that just didn't yield that much kind of like fun. So you kind of, I think it's important to keep it, some personal work going at all times.
So for mental sanity, you would say.
yeah definitely.
Your work ranges from various sectors. So I know you mentioned space, you've done the Warhorse book, and then you've done various other works as well, but you always seem to have a consistent style. So is this a conscious decision on your behalf?
I mean, I never feel like it looks consistent, but thank you for saying so. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges as an illustrator. I definitely, I'm very kind of like aware that I need to try and do that. I think my work changes across jobs quite a lot, but I try and keep certain things the same. So I'll always kind of use similar brushes, similar color palettes, and then there's like ways that I draw certain things, like trees or leaves or people, or hills or clouds or whatever. And I think those, sometimes when I'm drawing them, I'll be like, it would be more in keeping with other things I've done if I did it like this, and so on. But I think it always varies on the brief. Sometimes you don't have much control over that, and then what you make sometimes doesn't fit with the rest of your folio, and then you have that awkward moment where you have to decide whether to put it on your website or not. And it's very tough to keep your work looking consistent. Some people are incredible at it. I don't feel like I'm that good at it, but thank you. What else could I say about that?
No, that's fine if that's all you have to say. But I mean, I think for me, what it is about your work that's consistent is like the vibrancy of the colors, because you have very like saturated colors, and I think you also put in a lot of detail into your work. So how do you strike the balance between kind of keeping saturated colors but still relatively natural as well, like they're not too out there or anything?
I mean, it's quite tough. I think I always lean towards the kind of richer colors. I was basically never like taught proper color theory, like the kind of color wheel and how it works stuff. So I've always just kind of experimented with colors until I find something that works. But I've always made little swatches that I keep in a little folder, and then there's like reference pictures that I've swatched as well. And I think there's certain things that you kind of lean towards. Like when I first started illustration, I just it's almost like I picked like blue, yellow, orange, and like pink, turquoise, kind of tealy green, and we're like, these are my colors. And I don't know why. I think a lot of it came from screen printing. So I did a lot of I did a lot of screen printing at uni, so in the third year. And like, in order to do a consistent run of prints, you wouldn't want to kind of like come back and have to remix a color the next day, because then it would quite likely be different. So I used to use like shop bought colors. So I just use like cyan, magenta, the main kind of like ones that you can buy from the art shop. And then when I started making digital work, I think that that just kind of carried through. But I never was really kind of had much direction on color. But yeah, there's a few things that I think are good to remember though with color. One thing that I've kind of read about a bit is that if you let one color dominate, that kind of can quite, I don't know, it can kind of bring an image together. If you have two colors that are almost the same amount of each one, so say you had, I don't know, blue and a red, but they were both kind of in equal measure, the image can kind of look a little bit mixed. Whereas if you have one that has 70% and one that has 30% of the picture, I don't know, the image seems to work a bit better. Yeah. And then like often, like if you build an image on one color, you can like hint at loads of other little colors in it, but the main color is blue, say, or the main color is red, or so that's one thing I try and remember. And then maybe like making kind of color, like if you think about color in terms of like the natural world, like sometimes I just try and kind of copy what would be real. So like plants are green, and I don't know, the mist has this certain effect on a hill or on trees. It desaturates them. One tip that I always think of is that as colors recede into the distance, you can kind of add blue to make them look like they do in real life. Like as they go into the distance, the atmosphere kind of makes them look bluer and desaturate them a little bit. So the further and further back you go, the less and less saturated. That's always a good little tip.
Yeah, that's cool. So do you think you follow that advice consciously, like the tip of letting one color dominate the image?
I think it's something that I read more recently, actually, maybe in the last like 3 or 4 years. What was the book called? It was like it was an animator, the background designer, something Noble, The Noble Approach. That's it. There's a great book about doing backgrounds for animation, and he talks about color theory in that book. And I'd recommend that book to anyone. That's definitely a great book. There's also one called A Dictionary of Color Combinations, which is it's really good as well. If you want some kind of nice swatches, and it's a nice kind of nicely made little book, very small, but
cool.
can sit on your computer, and it's great.
It sounds cool. I just wanted to touch back on what you said about printmaking, because I think that's really interesting. I feel like a lot of the artists I've interviewed, they have some kind of traditional art that they go back to. So do you still do traditional art at all?
I mean, I do a little bit, but not as much as I'd like to. I tend to kind of like do a little bit of sketching in my sketchbook before any project. So I'll do like little thumbnails with pencil or ink, and then I haven't been printmaking for ages, which is kind of like it's been quite sad. Like I would love to do that. I think maybe that's something to do in the future. But over lockdown I bought this like little paint box, which is really cool. It's like it's called a pochard box. You can kind of like put a little panel in it, and then I've been taking out gouache paints, and they're really nice because they have like a chalky feel to them. It's a really nice kind of like paint to play with, and it's quite easy to clean up. I started with oil, and I was getting absolutely covered in it. And when I was taking it out to there's a little wood near my house basically. I was taking it out there and coming back, and all my clothes were ruined. So
oh gosh.
I switched to gouache. And I've been trying to do that as much as I can, but I'm still like a million miles off being good enough to kind of like add that to my, I don't know, my other work or share it with anyone. I feel like it's quite, they're quite embarrassing, my attempts, but hopefully.
But it's good. It's good, like that you feel like it's a good thing, right? To have a traditional medium to kind of,
absolutely. I think it's it keeps you on your toes, It's I think there's something about it. if you're just drawing with one, I don't know, I like spend way too much time on a Wacom tablet, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I can barely even draw with a pencil because I've almost forgotten, and I'm subconsciously trying to press undo with my other hand, and I can't on the paper. And I think it just, it's good to switch it up. I think it makes you, I don't know, a little bit more flexible, and it adds to your work, I think.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
I think in a way we're like spoiled because we have Control Z.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the amount of times I use it almost per line that I draw sometimes is sometimes each line is done 3 times before it's right, and it's like, this is not it's not how the masters did it, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it is the new age now. We have to adapt. So you are part of an agency, correct?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you go about getting into an agency? Because maybe people listening to this may be interested in doing the same.
Well, I met an agency when I was at uni, actually, just before my degree show. They were called the Artworks, and they were great. They kind of gave me like a portfolio review, and then I had like a 1-year trial with them. And it took me maybe, I think I didn't get any jobs for about 8 months or something, but then like right towards the end of the trial year, I got an editorial job.
Oh, cool.
And that was kind of like my first ever real job. Yeah, and then more recently I moved to a different agency called Everyone Agency, and that's run by a lady called Helen, who's really lovely. And I think I'm not very good at the kind of like self-promotion or business side of things, so having an agent has like been like a massive help for me. I'd say if you're similar to me in that respect, and need help in that department, it's definitely a really good way of kind of like just being able to get on with the work and not have to kind of like stress too much about, because there's a lot of organization that goes into kind of putting together a job, often like the back and forth and the sending a quote and getting that back, and I just hate doing all of that. So it's been very good having an agent, and then doing all the promotion. It's and it's just the support. Often like on a job you're quite stressed anyway, and then you'll get some changes through and you'll be tearing your hair out, and then you can call your agent and be like, and discuss the changes, and they can go back to them, and it's like having a buffer between you and the client, which is really nice. But then I do know loads of people that have done it without having an agent and have been like super successful. Do you know, there's a lady called Nina Cosford. Do you know her?
No.
She's really great. You should check her out. But she's never had an agency, I don't think, anyway. And she was in my year at uni, and she's just done incredibly well. But she's so good at kind of like the social media aspect, and just kind of like looking out for herself and so on. And I think it's like absolutely possible to do it like either way. I don't think there's necessarily a right way to do it, but I'd say it can really help at the start, having an agency. It's just it can be a little bit intimidating kind of approaching an agency, because you almost want to have a portfolio already before you meet an agent, but you're kind of like going to an agency in order to kind of get help to create a portfolio. So it's
the typical job dilemma, like you need experience to get a job, but to get a job you need experience. And
there's no easy way to do it, I think. I mean, I don't know what I'd recommend, but maybe I mean, you can reach out to most people these days on Instagram. So I guess you can get in touch with any agency really through that. But yeah, having a kind of like having a meeting with someone face to face is always quite good. I think you can kind of, you know, start a relationship, and even if it doesn't start with you getting you know, represented by them straight away, just making that kind of initial contact and getting some feedback on your portfolio, because an agent will definitely, if you ask, kind of give you some great feedback on like what they're looking for, and if you're not right, then what you could do to improve your portfolio. Yeah, so I think it's definitely worth reaching out to people.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, there's the possibility of doing it either way. And I guess sometimes if you're a freelance illustrator, it might get a bit lonely, right? So, you know, maybe having an agent is kind of a good way to, offset the loneliness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, even for there's like you know, like the Christmas party every year, which is worth. It's just nice meeting other illustrators, and you kind of all in the same boat, you know, and all have something in common. So yeah, it's really nice. It can be quite a lonely job actually. I spent years working from home on my own, and yeah, I wouldn't recommend it forever. It's yeah, I think it's quite nice getting out and working in I don't know, there's, you know, workspaces that you can go to, or, you know, just meeting other people. But I think it's the kind of like leaving the house at 9, getting home at 6, you know, feeling like you're a real person is the kind of the nice thing about that. Yeah,
definitely. And you mentioned as well client work, so I wanted to just speak a bit more about that. How do you kind of go from client brief to the final product? What's your process?
Oh, well, I mean, in an ideal world, it's literally you get the brief, you do a rough, they like the rough, and then you do the final artwork, and then it gets approved. But yeah, in reality, I think there's always a lot more to be done. There's always a lot of changes that go on. So realistically, there'll maybe be 2 rounds of changes at the rough stage, and 2 or 3 changes at the final stage. And for me, that's always been a little bit easier because I'm doing it in Photoshop. So, you know, someone wants something changed from red to blue or something, you know, it's literally very easy. Or, you know, a character removed, you can just turn the layer off. But I think that's in fact why I gravitated towards Photoshop, is because I was getting so many changes from clients that it just made the process easier. I started, well, all my kind of first couple of years of illustration, I did everything on a light box, and I'd like draw in black and white, scan it in and stuff. So if there were changes, then I'd have to go back to the light box, and, you know, it would take a lot longer. Yeah, but yeah, the process is kind of, it depends. I mean, you can have really smooth jobs that go through straight away and they love it, or I think I had one where I had something like 34 changes to a poster, which was like an absolute nightmare. Yeah, I think it's worth having like in your initial agreement, like setting out a kind of, I'd say a realistic number is like 2 to 3 changes at rough stage and 2 to 3 changes at the final stage, depending on how easy it is for you to make them. But yeah, and then any more than that, you can kind of charge a fee for your time, because you can literally, you know, be doing changes forever. So yeah, it's good to have an end point.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, where is it possible to even draw a line kind of with a client saying, I'm sorry, I can't do that? Because, I mean, when you're doing client work, do you try and stick with your style, or do you just kind of go with exactly what they want? Is there a line between that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on the kind of like do whatever they want end of the spectrum. And then my kind of approach has always been like, you know, they're paying me to do the job, so I'm doing it, you know, I'm trying to make it as much, you know, like they would like it as possible. And I want, I'd like to have a, happy customer that's pleased with the image at the end, not somebody that's kind of like feels like they've kind of had to fight a battle against somebody that's like wants it to look like their own thing. But I mean, it's a very difficult line to draw. I think I think you kind of have to just play it by the situation, really. There's definitely been times where, I've said to my agency, I'm not sure about this change, or can we push back on that, or and some things that you'll look at and you'll be like, well, I think it would be better if we did this instead. And I think just having a conversation each time. It's quite hard to draw a kind of straight, strict line of like what's acceptable and not. But I think that definitely helps if you have an agency, because you don't have to do it yourself, because it's quite a scary thing to do. Definitely. I have done it in the past, and I'm always quite uncomfortable saying no.
Not recommended then.
Yeah. No, but absolutely. I think if I think there is a kind of like I think there is some integrity that you have to keep in your work, and I think you can say it is right to say no at times. I think it's just it depends on the situation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And this was something I was kind of curious about, is why would companies want illustrations? Because they could hire a photographer, they could kind of get a motion designer, or they could get a 3D graphics person. I mean, you can literally create anything through 3D graphics. So why would people, or companies, should I say, want their campaign or whatever to be illustrated?
Well, I always think that illustrations are like super flexible. You can literally like show anything together. I don't know, you can piece together an image in exactly how somebody wants. And that's very difficult with photography, to do to draw a cow on the moon or something. Like you can draw that easily, but you can't photograph it. But and nowadays, as you say, think anything's achievable in CG. But I just think that often requires quite a big team and can be quite expensive. Whereas like illustration, it's pretty cost effective. You're often employing one person, and I think also illustration has that kind of like it's got that handmade feel. It feels like it's created by somebody. It has a human touch, which I think often clients or companies that are commissioning illustration, that's what they're looking for. Is they kind of want to say that they're we're a small company that cares about our team and workforce and customers and stuff, so on. So I feel like illustration is a great way to kind of like communicate the person to person aspect of it.
Actually, just on that, a question that just came to me now. I mean, you mentioned about small companies wanting to be kind of, they have this humane approach. So do you do all your illustrations in Raster, right?
How do you mean? What like?
I mean, what, like, because like I'm looking at your illustrations and they all kind of have this raster feeling. But these days clients want like vector illustrations for their websites, right? So have you ever done that kind of work, or is it purely raster that you do?
I mean, everything I make is in Photoshop, really. I have had some jobs where I've needed to vectorize things, but I usually my kind of comeback to that is that I usually just make a bigger Photoshop file that they can scale up. I think I've never actually learned Illustrator properly. I can just use do some basic things in it. So but I know it's a great tool. Like loads of people I know love it and use it really well. I think just for me, I've always focused on like texture and kind of brush marks and so on. So they're quite hard to achieve in Illustrator or in vectors.
No, I mean, it definitely adds like character to your work. But actually, just speaking on kind of softwares and things, I noticed you also do animation. So I'm really curious to kind of know a bit more about that. Do you do frame by frame animation? Do you hand draw everything, or do you use After Effects?
Yeah, a little bit of both actually. I do. I mean, I don't tend to animate much, but I'll do a little bit of After Effects stuff sometimes, and then yeah. I mean, this year I've been just helping out on a job cleaning up animation. So in Photoshop, yeah, just doing like frame by frame, painting each layer. Yeah, which has been it's been quite fun. Yeah, but I just do that in Photoshop. And I kind of my animation skills are kind of a little bit limited. I tend to, if I'm on an animation job, I tend to be doing the backgrounds or the storyboards. But yeah, I think, I mean, After Effects is an amazing program. I'd love to know it more. I kind of tend to just like make a scene and like twinkle the stars or like like do a shooting star or move some clouds or some mist. But yeah, my skills are kind of limited at that really. But yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough. But is the way that you make the Photoshop file different when you animate? Like, is there anything that's different about it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, everything needs to be on layers. And often, like if you're doing a normal drawing, you wouldn't have to like draw behind something. So say if you had a plant in the foreground, you wouldn't need to draw what's behind it. But in animation, when that's moving, you need to draw everything on each layer. So yeah, you just have to plan it a little bit more. And yeah, make sure you're being neat with your like labeling each thing, because when they transfer from Photoshop to After Effects, you want to know that you're just seeing little kind of layer 34, layer 35. So it's better to kind of like be really organized, have everything ready to go. Yeah, and kind of organized a bit like a stage. So foregrounds at the top and the backgrounds at the back, and everything in between is in order. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So name your layers, everyone.
Yeah. Especially if you're on if you're working at a company. Yeah, I always get told off for that. Or like I remember going into a company and I was using these things called clipping masks, and everybody else was using like normal masks, and people were like, what the hell are these? And I was like, and all of my files had like one layer with 12 layers clipped to it. And yeah, so yeah, it's quite, you've gotta learn your how people like to receive their work. But
yeah. Another thing I wanted to actually speak about was social media. So what kind of role does social media play in your art journey or in your illustration journey?
I mean, social media, it definitely plays like a really huge role in my business. I feel like my Instagram is way more kind of visited than my website. I don't think many people actually go on my website anymore. Yeah, it's almost like my Instagram feels like it's like a social website or a blog or whatever. And I think it does definitely brings in work and keeps you kind of like in kind of people's I don't know, recent memory, I guess. But having said that, I'm pretty useless at keeping on top of it. I kind of really I'm not very good. And I think often I worry because I don't have many things to post, because often I'll be doing longer jobs. For example, say like Warhorse, where I was working on it for 2 years, but I wasn't allowed to post anything. So, but I'm, working on it almost every other day. So it would feel like, it would feel like there was never anything to post. So I think it's just about being organized. I definitely should probably be posting more kind of process things and like how things are going, rather than needing to always just post the final outcome. But yeah, I think it's a really important kind of vehicle for, you know, growing your audience and your client base. I think loads of people I know have huge followings, and you know, they get all their work from there. And I definitely feel like I'm like slacking on that front. But I think do you know Behance or Behance?
Yep.
I really like that one actually, because it's kind of a little bit more like you can post the project and post all the kind of like development work from it. And I quite like that platform actually. But it's definitely it's really important, I think.
I mean, I guess everyone has their own social media platform, you know, like the ones that they gravitate towards. As well. Because there's so many these days. Like, I'm trying TikTok, but it's just not sticking with me. So that's just but what you mentioned about the process. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I don't know if it would work for me either. I'm a bit shy on camera, and don't know.
But I mean, what you were saying about sharing the process is very important. I mean, like, Instagram, I don't know if you know, but Instagram has now released the Reels. If you've heard of it.
Okay, I think so. What, like, are they like, I don't know, videos of?
So it's like TikTok videos, like the vertical format, 15, 30 seconds. People post a lot of like, you know, their process, kind of, you know, just little snippets, which is really useful, and it gets a lot of engagement as well, because people are really interested in seeing that kind of thing.
Definitely. No, I'm always enjoy watching people's process. I'm always just a bit nervous to share it myself, because I'm like, what if it's going to be rubbish, or
no,
like
not at all.
If the client doesn't like it, or you know, the iPad is actually really good for that, because it exports like a little video, doesn't it?
Exactly.
I started trying to make a little YouTube channel over lockdown, where I was like exporting videos of like YouTube sketches that I was doing. But I kind of, I need to, there's so many things I was trying, and then I jumped onto one called Dribble, and I was like, oh, maybe this is the new thing. And then it's I get kind of like quite easily swayed by the new platform. But I know I'm neglecting the other ones, and I should. So
I mean, a tip
it's
that
a hard
I've
world.
heard, but the tip that I've heard is just focus on 2 or 3 platforms max. And then just stick with those, because you can't do everything. You just can't.
No, absolutely.
Let's kind of take it back to your childhood, because I think what's really interesting is that your dad is also an artist. Is that correct?
He does.
So how was it like growing up, you know, with a artistic parent or parents?
It was great actually. There was always a lot of artwork around, and my parents really enjoyed going to exhibitions. So we went to quite a lot as kids, and then my uncle was also a painter, so we'd always go down and see him. And I think it just kind of like maybe like showed that you could do that as a job, even though my dad didn't do it, as he was kind of did part-time painting, and he's a teacher, but he does a lot more painting now. But I think it kind of like it kind of showed me that it was possible, I guess. And I was always like, I enjoyed doing kind of art as a kid, so it was nice getting some good feedback from my parents. They've always been quite kind of a good sounding board for ideas, especially when I was at uni. I used to kind of like, because the projects were kind of all, you know, self-led and all quite stressful to kind of like finish in time, I'd always like be calling them up, like, what do you think about this idea and that? It definitely it was real. I think I was very lucky to have a few people that were creative in the family. It's really, really great.
Nice. And you also mentioned self-led projects, which nicely leads me on to my next question, which is how do you manage to stay kind of self-motivated and self-organized as a freelance illustrator?
I mean, it's a challenge, definitely. Yeah, I think it. I mean, I think you have to accept that it kind of goes in ups and downs. Motivation, that is. I think doing a few things, yeah, like a few personal projects is really good. I find that, like, weirdly, as I've got older, like, I've noticed a lot more that taking a break is like a really important kind of like part of staying motivated. Like, I'll do a job and get really burnt out by it, and it often be kind of like 3 or 4 months on that one job, but then have a real long break, have like 2 or 3 weeks of just doing my own stuff, or kind of like maybe going on holiday, or going to visit a new place or see some exhibitions or whatever. And I think having a bit of time away always kind of like makes me excited to come back and do something new. Yeah, so I think, but it's very hard to stay motivated. I think yeah, maybe like being organized is quite a good way to do it. Or like, if you when everything's in place and kind of easy for you to make your work, like having like nice routines, so like you have a studio that you go to every day, and certain people that you kind of like share it with, that you discuss your work with and bounce ideas off, and seeing them working on projects kind of helps motivate you. But yeah, having a bit of a kind of structure to your day, I find, is a big help, because I think motivation is going to kind of come in and out. But if you're always going in, you're always making something, and you never quite know when it could strike halfway through the day. So yeah, if you're in already and you've done all that, you've had your porridge and you've done your emails, then you're ready to go anyway. And then it's a tough one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that really makes sense. I mean, there's a book that I really like called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah. And
I've read it. Yeah,
he talks about no matter what, you have to just keep slogging through. Like, no matter if you've got a lot of resistance, it doesn't matter. You just keep every day. You just keep plugging through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think just turning up is the key.
Turning up, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, like I try and set myself a thing where, like, even though illustration, if you're freelance or whatever, it's not necessarily like a full-time job. Like, if you treat it like a full-time job, like, you go in, you sit there from 9 till 6 or whatever, or whenever you finish. But if you're there, then you're going to make some work, and it might not all be good, but at least you're doing it and you're moving it forward. So yeah, I think it's a great book, that, though.
Yeah,
so
definitely
recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we've answered the other questions, but I guess my final question would be, where would you like to see yourself moving forward in your career?
Oh, I mean, it's a tough one. I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot. I always have this one. I mean, when I eventually retire, I would like to get into painting full time. But in the kind of nearer future, I'd quite like to work on like maybe like a TV series or a film, doing some backgrounds, or artworking, or being an art director. Quite a few of my friends have kind of like transitioned into that a little bit and are making kind of like animated TV shows. And just like working as a big part of the team seems like a really nice way to work. But yeah, I think doing a bit of that. I want to do a lot more, like a lot more travel drawing, with my work at the moment. I'm really enjoying. I've been doing this kind of personal project slowly over the last nearly 2 years now, and the pandemic's not made it easy, but to kind of like draw the national parks around the UK.
Wow.
So I've been kind of like trying to go to each one, and I've only done about 5 or 6 national parks so far. I mean, it's not like somewhere like America where they're like miles away. They're all quite not far driving distance or hopping on a train. But just like I'd quite like to make some of my own books about kind of places that I've been and spend a little bit more time doing kind of slower work that's done from observation. But I mean, there's a lot of things that I'd like to do. But those are a few of them at the moment.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I hope you can do that in the future, and I hope that you'll be able to fulfill your national park dream.
Yeah, me too. Only 7 left, I think, or something.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it should be good. I've kind of like, I've pitched the idea to a couple of publishers, and they've no takers yet. But I think it's partly because it kind of like it would technically only appeal to a UK audience, and lots of publishers like to kind of publish things that are much wider reaching. Like a picture book can be published in many different languages, but we'll see. Hopefully.
That's interesting. Just you mentioned the pitching thing. How do you pitch your ideas to a publisher? Is it through like presentation or?
It's like I mean, I put together like a document in InDesign usually. So I'll start with kind of like an idea and like a title page, and then a bit about the idea, and then I'll always do kind of maybe a couple of like storyboard sketches and almost like a mood board of images, and like my idea for like the structure of a book, and then I'll try and do like 1 or 2 like finished artwork style frames. And that kind of gives them like a kind of an overview of the idea. But I've done it in a couple of different ways. Sometimes I just would send an email, and then if they like it, they might invite you in to discuss it. But then with some publishers I've kind of worked with for quite a while, so I've kind of like, when I've gone in for a meeting, I've been like, oh, do you want to have a look at this as well, or but I think there's no kind of like concrete way to do it. You just kind of reaching out with an idea. But I think the more you can show them in terms of like development, the kind of like clearer the vision is, then the easier it is for them to commission it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think that's just a nice little piece of information for people as well.
Definitely, it's a lovely way to make work doing a children's book. You get a lot more time. Often you get like a year or 6 months or so you can kind of like you develop it a lot more and spend a lot more time kind of like editing and kind of pushing the characters and making sure everything's right. So it's I'd recommend it as a platform to make work, definitely.
Nice. Yeah. And is there anything like final comments that you want to say or anything?
I'll just say I guess to anyone starting illustration or kind of like leaving uni, that just to kind of stick with it and keep making work. And I think making the work that you want to make is quite important, and shows your kind of your hunger and enthusiasm. I remember when I first left uni, I really wanted to get a book cover commission, but I didn't have any book covers in my portfolio. So I made all these like fake book covers for made up books that I'd made up with made up authors and titles and stuff, and then sent them out as like newsletters to publishers that I'd kind of like got their emails from their websites and stuff. And eventually it did lead to one book cover commission, and then another one. It took a long time, maybe 2 or 3 years before I got one, but it was definitely kind of like, I think if you show people the work that you would like to make, then there's they've got more evidence that you can make it. And I think and just kind of staying the course, really. It kind of definitely goes up and down, and there's quiet patches, and really stressful, hectic patches, but yeah, just kind of like, you know, having breaks, not getting too stressed, and sticking with it, I'd say.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice to end with. But thank you so much, Tom. This was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me, Noor. It was great.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really hoped you enjoyed it, learning from a professional illustrator and how he's been doing it for the last 10 plus years. And I thought it was particularly nice to hear about Tom's experiences growing up in a creative family and how that helped him and kind of molded him into the illustrator that he is today. And with that, I will end this episode here, and I'll see you next week for another amazing episode right here on the Pixel Paper podcast. Bye!